And what I want to show us here now is just how the Bible paints for us a picture of how the Christian is to, on the one hand, absolutely trust in the sovereignty of God, absolutely trust in the providence of God, while at the same time taking proper responsibility in matters of faith and life here on earth. One of the places that we see this, for example, Philippians 2, verses 12 and 13. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, knowing all the while that it is God who is working in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure. So there we see both concepts put right together. We understand that this is God's work. This is God's sovereign work. Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. I know that He will bring His work to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. What He started in me, He will bring it to completion. But I also, chapter 2, work out my salvation with fear and trembling. Or we see the same sort of thing in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10. And this verse, take a look at just the interplay that we see here between what Paul calls the grace of God in him and working in him, and Paul's earthly hard work that he's putting into the ministry work he's doing. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and His grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me. So you see there the interplay between the sovereign grace of God, the enabling grace of God, and Paul himself saying, well, I don't just take that grace to mean I don't have to put in the effort. I don't just take that grace to mean, well, I can just sort of coast along to plant a church over in Philippi and coast over here to Thessalonica to plant a church there and coast on down to Corinth. Instead, I work harder than anybody, knowing the whole time it's not me, but it's the enabling grace of God. You see the interplay there. It's a beautiful interplay. Or we see it in places like Matthew 10 and verse 16. We're told to be as wise as serpent or innocent as doves. One of the places that this is very clear is Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, we see those two examples in which we're told about the wisdom of assessing a task before beginning it. And a king that's going to go out to battle, or somebody that's going to build something, and you assess the cost, you assess the role, you assess the task before setting out upon it. So we take all those pieces and we put them together and we feed them into our biblical doctrine that tells us of the absolute sovereignty of God, of the providence of God in our life, of the fact that God rules over every circumstance in our life. And putting those two things together, we are given a doctrine that tells us to trust emphatically and totally and completely in the protection and the sovereignty of God, yet do not sin against Him by presuming that you can do whatever you want to do or fail to do whatever you want to do, and God's going to come to your rescue.